The boardroom door slammed open, and every executive fell silent. Victoria Hale stood there, her jaw tight, her eyes burning with something none of them had seen in 10 years. Panic. "Someone find out whose kid is in my office," she said, her voice razor sharp. "Now." But when she turned back toward the glass wall overlooking her private space, she froze. The little girl with tangled brown hair wasn't crying or making a mess. She was sitting in Victoria's chair humming softly, holding a worn stuffed rabbit, and smiling at her like she wasn't the most feared woman in the city. I'm sharing this story with you today. If you enjoy it, please hit like and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let's begin. Noah Carter's hands were black with grease when his phone buzzed for the third time. He didn't look at it. The carburetor he was rebuilding had stripped threads, and if he didn't finish the job by 5, Jerry would dock his pay again. The shop radio crackled through static, some talk show host arguing about the economy like any of it mattered to people who couldn't afford to fix their own cars. "Noah," Jerry's voice cut through the noise. "Your kid's here." Noah's head snapped up. Emma wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at the community center for another hour, doing crafts with the other kids whose parents couldn't afford real daycare. He dropped the wrench and wiped his hands on his jeans, already moving toward the front of the shop. Emma stood by the counter, her backpack sliding off one shoulder, her jacket buttoned wrong. She was 6, small for her age, with his late wife's dark eyes and a stubborn streak that came from both of them. "Baby, what are you doing here? Where's Miss Angela?" "She said I could leave early because I finished my drawing." Emma held up a piece of construction paper covered in crayon stick figures. "That's you? That's me? And that's Mama watching us from the clouds." Noah's chest tightened. He crouched down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's real pretty, sweetheart. But you can't just walk here by yourself. We talked about this." "I know the way. It's only 4 blocks. 4 blocks is too far." "But I wanted to show you." Jerry cleared his throat. "Carter, I got customers waiting." Noah bit back a response. He glanced at the clock, 4:17. Not enough time to take Emma home and get back before Jerry closed up for the night. "Can you hang out in the break room for a bit? I just need to finish one thing." Emma's face fell, but she nodded. She'd gotten good at nodding, at not complaining, at understanding that sometimes Daddy didn't have a choice. That was the part that killed him most. He set her up with a juice box and some crackers he kept in his locker, then returned to the bay. His hands moved on autopilot, twisting bolts and checking seals, but his mind was elsewhere. 4 blocks. She'd walked 4 blocks on her own because she wanted to show him a drawing. He should have been there. He should have picked her up himself, should have been the kind of father who had time for construction paper and crayons. But he wasn't. He was the kind who worked 60-hour weeks and still came up short on rent. By the time he finished, it was past 6. The sun had dropped behind the buildings, turning the sky a bruised purple. He found Emma asleep in the break room, her head on the table, one hand still clutching her drawing. He lifted her carefully, feeling the weight of her trust in how she curled against his shoulder without waking. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Emma stirred halfway through, blinking up at him with sleepy confusion before settling back against his chest. By the time they reached their apartment, she was out again. He carried her up 3 flights of stairs, unlocked the door with one hand, and laid her on her bed without turning on the lights. Her shoes came off easy. He pulled the blanket up to her chin and stood there for a moment, just watching her breathe. Their apartment was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix. Emma had the bedroom. Noah slept on the couch. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the couple next door arguing most nights, but Emma never complained. She'd learned not to ask for things they couldn't afford. He made himself a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter, too tired to sit. The mail was stacked on the table, bills mostly, and a notice from the landlord about next month's rent increase. $50. $50 that might as well have been $500. He thought about his wife. Sarah had been gone 3 years, and some days it felt like 30, other days like 30 minutes. Cancer didn't care that they had a 3-year-old daughter, or that Noah worked construction and couldn't afford the kind of treatment that might have made a difference. It just took her, slow and cruel, until there was nothing left but medical debt and a little girl who asked when Mommy was coming home. Noah finished his sandwich and dropped the plate in the sink. He should have washed it, should have cleaned up the breakfast dishes too, But he didn't have it in him. He sank onto the couch and closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion pull him under. The next day started the same way every day did. Emma's alarm going off at 6:30, Noah dragging himself off the couch to make scrambled eggs and toast, both of them moving through the routine like actors who'd rehearsed their parts too many times. "Daddy, can I have orange juice?" "We're out, baby. How about water?" "Okay." She didn't ask why they were out. She never did. He dropped her at the community center at 7:15, kissed her forehead, and told her he'd see her after work. She waved from the doorway, her backpack almost as big as she was, and then she was gone. Noah stood there longer than he should have, watching the door like she might come back out, like something might go wrong the second he looked away. But nothing did. Nothing ever did, until it did. Work was the same. Jerry yelled about something, one of the other guys made a joke that wasn't funny, and Noah spent 8 hours elbow deep in engines that belonged to people who could afford to fix them. Lunch was a gas station burrito that tasted like cardboard. He ate it in the parking lot, scrolling through his phone, looking at job postings he'd never have time to apply for. By 3 o'clock, his back was screaming and his hands were raw. He was wrestling with a rusted exhaust pipe when his phone rang. He almost ignored it, but something made him check the screen. Community center. His stomach dropped. "Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Angela from the center. I'm calling because Emma, she's not here." The exhaust pipe clattered to the ground. "What do you mean she's not there? She was here this morning, but when I did the head count after lunch, she was gone. I've checked everywhere and, Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. I don't know how she slipped out." Noah didn't hear the rest. He was already running. The community center was a 10-minute drive, but Noah made it in 6, blowing through a red light and nearly clipping a taxi. He barely remembered parking, barely remembered the rush of panic that made his vision blur at the edges. Angela met him at the door, wringing her hands, talking too fast. "I swear, I just turned around for a second. Where would she go?" "I don't know. She didn't say anything." "Did you call the police?" "Not yet. I wanted to call you first." Noah was already moving past her, pulling out his phone, dialing Emma's number, even though she didn't have a phone. He tried the shop. No answer. He tried their apartment. Nothing. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. She's fine. She probably just went somewhere close. She's smart. She knows not to talk to strangers. But she was 6. 6-year-olds didn't think like adults. They saw the world as a safe place because they didn't know better yet. He stood on the sidewalk, trying to think like Emma, trying to remember what she'd said yesterday. "I know the way. It's only 4 blocks. The shop." She'd walked to the shop. He got back in his truck and drove, forcing himself to stay under the speed limit, scanning every sidewalk and crosswalk. His heart was a hammer in his chest. His hands shook on the wheel. And then he saw her. Not near the shop, not anywhere close. She was 2 blocks over, standing outside a tall glass building that didn't belong in this part of town. Hale Industries. Even Noah knew the name, Victoria Hale's company, the one that had bought out half the businesses in the area over the last 5 years. The building was all steel and reflective windows, the kind of place where people wore suits and didn't make eye contact with anyone who didn't. Emma was walking toward the entrance. Noah slammed on the brakes and threw the truck into park, not caring that he was blocking traffic. He sprinted across the street, his boots pounding the pavement. "Emma!" She turned and her face lit up. "Daddy, I was looking for you." He dropped to his knees in front of her, grabbing her shoulders, checking her for injuries even though she looked fine. "Baby, what are you doing here? You scared me half to death. I wanted to show you something, but you weren't at the shop. And then I saw this big building and I thought maybe you were working here today." "Emma, this isn't—" He stopped, pulling her into a hug, too relieved to be angry. "You can't do this. You can't just leave like that." "I'm sorry." "I know, baby. I know." He pulled back, brushing her hair out of her face. "But we got to get you back, okay? Miss Angela's real worried." "Okay." He stood, taking her hand, but before he could turn back toward the truck, the glass doors of the building slid open. A security guard stepped out, his expression neutral but his hand resting on his radio. "Sir, is there a problem?" No, no problem, just my daughter wandered off and I was picking her up. The guard looked at Emma, then back at Noah. You can't leave your vehicle there. I know, I'm moving it right now. But Emma had already slipped her hand out of his. She was walking toward the doors, craning her neck to see inside. Emma, it's so pretty in there, Daddy. Can we see? No, baby, we gotta go. But she was already through the doors, her small frame disappearing into the lobby before Noah could catch her. He swore under his breath and followed, the security guard close behind. The inside of the building was just as intimidating as the outside. Marble floors, high ceilings, modern art on the walls that probably cost more than Noah made in a year. A receptionist looked up from her desk, her smile polite but strained. Can I help you? I'm sorry, my daughter. She just ran in here. I'm getting her right now. But Emma wasn't stopping. She'd spotted the elevators and she was heading straight for them, her light-up sneakers flashing with every step. Emma Carter, you stop right now. She didn't stop. She pressed the button and the doors opened immediately. Before Noah could reach her, she stepped inside. Emma! The doors started to close. Noah lunged, catching them just in time, squeezing through the gap. The security guard tried to follow, but Noah held up a hand. I got her. I'll bring her right back down. The guard didn't look convinced, but he stepped back. The doors closed and the elevator began to rise. Noah looked at Emma, who was staring at the numbers above the door like this was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to her. Baby, what are you doing? I just wanted to see. See what? Where all the important people work. The elevator climbed. 10 floors, 20, 30. Noah's stomach twisted. He didn't belong here. Emma didn't belong here. They needed to get off at the next floor and take the stairs back down before someone decided to call the cops. But the elevator didn't stop. It kept climbing, past 40, past 50, until finally it slowed and the doors opened. The floor was different from the lobby. Quieter, darker. The carpet was thick enough to swallow sound, and the walls were lined with modern art that made Noah uncomfortable in ways he couldn't explain. A long hallway stretched ahead, ending in a set of double doors. Emma stepped out before Noah could stop her. Emma! She was already halfway down the hall. Noah followed, his boots too loud on the carpet, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the climb. He reached for her, but she pushed through the double doors, and then they were in a room that looked like something out of a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a conference table that could seat 20, and at the far end, a glass-walled office with a desk the size of Noah's couch. Emma walked straight toward it. Emma, we gotta go. But she was already inside, climbing into the massive leather chair behind the desk. She spun around once, giggling, her feet dangling a foot off the ground. Look, Daddy, I'm a boss. Noah stepped into the office, his pulse hammering. Baby, we can't be in here. This is someone's... Whose office is this? The voice came from behind him. Noah turned and his stomach dropped. She was standing in the doorway, tall, maybe 5'8", with dark hair pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones look sharp enough to cut. Her suit was black, perfectly tailored, and her heels clicked against the floor like a countdown. But it was her eyes that stopped him, pale gray, cold, and locked on Emma with an intensity that made Noah step between them without thinking. I'm sorry, he said. My daughter, she got away from me. We're leaving right now. The woman didn't move. She looked at Emma, who had stopped spinning and was now staring back with wide, curious eyes. What's your name? The woman asked. Emma hesitated, then said, Emma. Emma, the woman repeated. She stepped into the office, and Noah's instinct was to grab Emma and run, but something about the way the woman moved, careful, deliberate, like she was approaching something fragile, made him wait. Do you know where you are, Emma? Emma shook her head. This is my office. I work here. Are you a boss? The corner of the woman's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Yes, I'm a boss. That's so cool. Emma's face lit up. My daddy works with cars. He fixes them when they're broken. The woman glanced at Noah, and for the first time he felt the full weight of her attention. It was like being pinned under a spotlight. She looked him over, his grease-stained jeans, his worn jacket, the exhaustion he couldn't hide no matter how hard he tried, and he waited for the judgment, the dismissal, the polite request for him to leave and never come back. But she just said, That sounds like important work. Noah blinked. Yeah, I guess. The woman looked back at Emma. "What's that you're holding?" Emma held up her stuffed rabbit. "This is Mr. Carrot. He's my best friend. He looks well loved. He was my mama's when she was little. She gave him to me before she went to heaven." The room went silent. Noah's throat tightened, and he put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Come on, baby. We really need to go." But the woman was still looking at Emma, and something in her expression had shifted. The coldness was still there, but underneath it, there was something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "How old are you, Emma?" 6.5. 6.5, the woman repeated. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I'm Victoria." "That's a pretty name." "Thank you." Victoria straightened, and just like that, the moment was over. She looked at Noah, her expression unreadable. "You should be more careful. This isn't the kind of building where children wander around unsupervised." "I know, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Victoria's gaze lingered on him for a beat too long, and then she stepped aside. "The elevator is down the hall. I assume you can find your way out." Noah nodded, already guiding Emma toward the door, but as they reached the threshold, Emma turned back. "Bye, Victoria. It was nice to meet you." Victoria didn't respond right away. She was standing by her desk, her hand resting on the back of her chair, and for just a second her expression softened in a way that made her look almost human. "Goodbye, Emma." Noah didn't breathe easy until they were back in the truck. Emma buckled into the passenger seat, the city blocks putting distance between them and that glass tower. He gripped the wheel tight, his knuckles white, replaying the last 20 minutes in his head. "Daddy, are you mad?" He glanced at her. She was looking at him with those big worried eyes, the ones that made it impossible to stay angry. "No, baby, I'm not mad. But you gotta promise me you won't do that again. You gotta stay where I can find you." "I promise." "Good." He exhaled, forcing his hands to relax. "Let's get you back to Miss Angela, okay?" Emma nodded, and they drove in silence. But Noah couldn't shake the image of Victoria Hale standing in that office, looking at his daughter like she was something worth stopping for. He told himself it didn't matter. People like her didn't think about people like him. By tomorrow, she'd have forgotten Emma's name, forgotten the grease-stained mechanic who'd invaded her space. But he was wrong. Victoria stood at the window of her office long after the mechanic and his daughter had left. The city stretched below her, a grid of steel and glass and ambition. And somewhere down there, that little girl with the stuffed rabbit was probably already forgetting this ever happened. Children were like that. They moved through the world without carrying it. Victoria wasn't a child anymore. She'd stopped being one at 8, the year her father's company collapsed and took their family with it. She remembered the repo men loading furniture into trucks, her mother crying in an empty living room, the way her father had looked at her and said, "Don't ever let anyone make you small." She hadn't. She'd clawed her way through business school on scholarships and spite, built Hale Industries from a single commercial property acquisition into an empire that stretched across 6 states. She was 38, untouchable, and alone in every way that mattered. And yet that child had walked into her office like she belonged there. Victoria turned from the window and pressed the intercom. "Claire, get me the security footage from this afternoon, everything from the lobby to this floor." Her assistant's voice crackled back. "Is there a problem? Just do it." She released the button and sat at her desk, pulling up her schedule for the rest of the week. Board meeting Thursday. Acquisition review Friday. Conference call with the Singapore office at midnight. Her life was a series of appointments that left no room for anything unplanned, anything human. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother, Marcus. "Haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. Mom's asking questions." Victoria deleted it without responding. Marcus didn't understand that some relationships were better kept at a distance. Their mother had remarried years ago, moved to Arizona, started over. Victoria had been invited to the wedding. She hadn't gone. Claire knocked and entered without waiting for permission, setting a tablet on the desk. "Footage is queued up. You want to tell me what this is about?" A child wandered onto the executive floor. Claire's eyebrows shot up. "How did that happen?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Claire left, and Victoria pressed play. The footage showed the lobby first. The little girl entering with purpose, heading straight for the elevators despite the mechanic's obvious panic. Then the elevator ride, the girl's face bright with curiosity. Then the hallway, and finally, her office. Victoria watched herself interact with the child. watched the way her own posture had changed, the way she'd softened without meaning to. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. She paused the video on a frame of Emma sitting in her chair, holding that ridiculous rabbit, smiling like the world was safe. Victoria closed the tablet and pushed it aside. This was pointless. The incident was over. The child was fine. There was no reason to think about it anymore, except she couldn't stop. Noah got written up the next day. Jerry called him into the office, a glorified closet with a desk and a calendar from 2019, and told him that leaving in the middle of a shift was unacceptable, emergency or not. I told you my daughter was missing. And I'm telling you, if it happens again, you're done. I got a dozen guys who'd take your spot tomorrow. Noah bit his tongue. He needed this job. Emma needed this job. So he nodded and took the write-up and went back to the bay, where the other mechanics avoided his eyes because they'd all been in Jerry's office before and knew what it felt like. He worked until 8 that night, making up for lost time, and picked Emma up late from the after-hours program that cost him an extra $15 a day. She fell asleep on the bus ride home, and he carried her up the stairs, her head heavy on his shoulder. The apartment was cold. The heat had been acting up again, and the landlord kept promising to fix it, but never did. Noah turned on the space heater in Emma's room and tucked her in, then made himself instant ramen and ate it standing at the counter, scrolling through his phone. There was an email from the hospital. Another bill. Another reminder that Sarah's treatment had cost more than he'd ever be able to pay. He deleted it without opening it and set his phone down, staring at the wall. He thought about Victoria Hale, about the way she'd looked at Emma, like she was trying to solve a problem she didn't know existed. About the way she'd said, "That sounds like important work," and almost meant it. Noah shook his head. Women like that didn't think about men like him. He was a mechanic with a kid and a mountain of debt. She was a CEO with a corner office and a view of the entire city. Their worlds had collided for 5 minutes, and now they were back where they belonged. Victoria's Thursday board meeting was a disaster. Richard Drummond, the CFO and the loudest voice in the room, spent 40 minutes tearing apart her proposal to delay the Riverside acquisition. The property was a failing strip mall on the east side of town, the kind of place that used to matter before the big box stores moved in. Victoria wanted to hold off, restructure the deal, maybe convert it into mixed-use housing. Richard wanted to bulldoze it and flip the land to a developer who'd already offered twice what it was worth. "You're leaving money on the table," Richard said, leaning back in his chair like he owned it. "This is basic business, Victoria. We buy low, sell high, and move on. And displace 60 small businesses in the process. Businesses that are barely surviving. We'd be doing them a favor." Victoria's jaw tightened. "That's not how I operate." "Then maybe you should reconsider how you operate." Richard glanced around the table, rallying support. "Anyone else think we should be making emotional decisions about real estate?" A few board members shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up. Victoria looked at each of them, letting the silence stretch until it hurt. Then she said, "The acquisition is delayed pending further review. Meeting adjourned." She walked out before anyone could argue, her heels sharp against the marble floor. Claire was waiting outside, tablet in hand. "You've got the Singapore call in an hour, and Marcus called again. Cancel Singapore, reschedule for tomorrow." "Victoria, I said cancel it." Claire hesitated, then nodded. Victoria continued down the hall to her office, closing the door behind her and leaning against it. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the wood until they stopped. Richard was positioning himself to take over. She'd known it for months, but today was the first time he'd been bold enough to challenge her in front of the entire board. If she delayed the Riverside deal, he'd use it against her. If she approved it, she'd be signing the death warrant for businesses that had been there longer than Hale Industries had existed. She crossed to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere out there was that little girl with the rabbit. Somewhere out there was her father, probably working himself to the bone just to keep the lights on. Victoria pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. She scrolled to Marcus and stared at his name for a long moment before putting the phone away. She didn't need her brother's advice. She didn't need anyone's. She just needed to figure out why she couldn't stop thinking about a child she'd met for 5 minutes. The invitation arrived on Monday. Hand-delivered, printed on cardstock that felt expensive. Emma brought it home from school, pulling it out of her backpack like it was treasure. Look, Daddy, I got invited to a thing. Noah took the card, frowning. It was from Hale Industries, addressed to Emma Carter and family. A charity event, black tie optional, proceeds going to local youth programs. The date was Saturday. The location was the ballroom at the Grand Marquis downtown. Who gave you this? A lady came to the community center. She said it was for me because I was special. Noah's stomach turned. He read the card again, looking for some kind of mistake, some explanation that made sense. But there it was, printed in clean black letters. Emma Carter and family. Baby, we can't go to this. Why not? Because he stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't make her feel small. Because it's not really for people like us. But the lady said I was invited. She said it was going to be fun. Noah set the card on the table and ran a hand through his hair. This had to be some kind of mistake. Or worse, some kind of joke. Maybe someone at Hale Industries thought it would be funny to invite the mechanic and his kid to a fancy party, just to watch them squirm. But Emma was looking at him with those hopeful eyes, and he didn't have the heart to tell her that the world didn't work the way she thought it did. Let me think about it, okay? Okay? She hugged him, then ran off to her room to play. Noah picked up the card again. At the bottom, in smaller print, was a note. Handwritten. We'd be honored if you could attend. V.H. Victoria Hale. Noah stared at the initials until they blurred. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. But why? He thought about throwing the card away, pretending it never came. But Emma had already told Miss Angela about it, and by the end of the week, half the community center would know. If he didn't take her, he'd have to explain why, and he didn't have a good answer. So on Saturday, he borrowed a suit from his friend Carlos, who was 2 inches shorter and 20 pounds heavier, and tried to make it work. The pants were too short. The jacket pulled across his shoulders. He looked like a kid playing dress-up, and he hated it. Emma wore the dress they'd bought for Sarah's funeral. It was blue, a little too big, but she'd insisted on wearing it because it was the fanciest thing she owned. She spun in front of the bathroom mirror, and Noah's chest ached. You look beautiful, baby. Do you think Victoria will be there? I don't know. Maybe. I hope so. I want to show her Mr. Carrot. Noah forced a smile. I'm sure she'd like that. They took the bus downtown, Emma chattering the entire way about what the party might be like. Noah stared out the window, his stomach in knots. The Grand Marquis was the kind of place he'd only ever seen from the outside. Marble columns, red carpet, valet parking. When they arrived, he almost turned around. But Emma was already pulling him toward the entrance, and a doorman in a crisp uniform opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good evening. May I see your invitation? Noah handed it over, half expecting the man to laugh and turn them away. But he just glanced at it, nodded, and gestured them inside. The ballroom was massive. Crystal chandeliers, polished floors, tables draped in white linen. People in suits and gowns stood in clusters, holding champagne flutes and laughing at jokes Noah couldn't hear. He felt every eye turn toward them as they walked in, felt the weight of their judgment like a hand on his back. Emma didn't notice. She was staring at the chandeliers, her mouth open in wonder. Daddy, it's like a castle. Yeah, baby, it is. A waiter passed by with a tray of drinks. Noah took a glass of water and downed half of it in one gulp. He scanned the room, looking for an exit, a corner, anywhere they could stand without being noticed. And then he saw her. Victoria was across the room, talking to a man in a charcoal suit. She looked different than she had in her office. Softer, somehow, though her posture was still rigid, her expression still guarded. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost more than Noah's truck, and her hair was down, falling in dark waves over her shoulders. She glanced up, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Victoria excused herself from the man she was talking to and started toward them. Noah's pulse kicked up. He put a hand on Emma's shoulder, unsure whether to stay or run. Victoria stopped a few feet away, her gaze flicking between him and Emma. You came. Yeah, Emma wanted to. Noah cleared his throat. Thanks for the invitation. You didn't have to do that. I know. Emma stepped forward, holding up Mr. Carrot. Look, Victoria. I brought him so you could meet him properly. Victoria looked at the rabbit, then crouched down to Emma's level. Up close, Noah could see the faint lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. She wasn't as untouchable as she'd seemed in her office. "It's nice to meet you properly, Mr. Carrot," Emma giggled. "He says it's nice to meet you too." Victoria's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. She stood, her attention shifting back to Noah. "You look uncomfortable." "That obvious?" "You're standing like you're about to bolt." Noah laughed despite himself. "Can you blame me?" "No?" Victoria glanced around the room, then back at him. "Come on, there's a quieter area upstairs." She didn't wait for an answer. She just turned and walked toward a staircase at the far end of the ballroom. Noah hesitated, then followed, Emma skipping beside him. The upstairs lounge was smaller, dimmer, with leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A few people were scattered around, but it was mostly empty. Victoria led them to a corner near the windows and gestured for them to sit. Emma climbed into a chair that swallowed her, and Noah sat across from Victoria, feeling like he'd walked into a trap he didn't understand. "Why did you invite us?" he asked. Victoria didn't answer right away. She looked at Emma, who was pressed against the window, pointing at the lights below. "Your daughter made an impression," she said finally. "Yeah, well, she's good at that." "You say that like it's a bad thing." "I say it like I know how the world works." Noah leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "People like you don't usually invite people like me to parties. So what's this really about?" Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "You think I have an agenda?" "Don't you?" She considered that, then said, "I run a company that makes decisions affecting thousands of people. One of those decisions involves a property on the east side, a strip mall that's barely staying afloat. My board wants me to sell it to a developer who'll tear it down and put up condos. I'm considering other options." Noah frowned. "What does that have to do with us?" "The auto shop where you work. It's in that mall." The words hit him like a punch. Noah sat back, his mind racing. "You're shutting us down." "I haven't decided yet." "But you're thinking about it. The property isn't profitable. If I don't sell, I'll have to find another way to make it viable, and that might mean raising rents. Either way, businesses in that mall are going to feel it." Noah's hands curled into fists. "So you invited us here to what? Warn me? Make yourself feel better?" "I invited you because your daughter walked into my office like she had every right to be there, and it made me think." Victoria's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. "About what happens to people when the numbers stop making sense. About what it costs to survive in a system that doesn't care." "You're part of that system." "I know." Emma turned from the window, oblivious to the tension. "Daddy, can we get food? I saw little sandwiches downstairs." Noah forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Go ahead. I'll be right there." Emma ran off, and Noah turned back to Victoria. "You want to know what it costs? I work 60 hours a week and still can't pay my bills. My daughter eats cereal for dinner half the time because I can't afford anything else. And now you're telling me I might lose my job because some developer wants to build condos for people who'll never set foot in that neighborhood." Victoria didn't flinch. "I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you I'm trying to find another way." "Why?" "Because your daughter sat in my chair and smiled at me like I wasn't a stranger, and because you stood there and treated me like a person, not a title." She paused, her gaze steady. "I don't get that often." Noah didn't know what to say to that. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something he hadn't expected. She wasn't cold. She was exhausted. The same kind of exhausted he saw in the mirror every morning. "You didn't have to invite us," he said quietly. "I know." "So why did you?" Victoria looked out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Because I wanted to see if you'd come." Chat. They stayed for another hour. Emma ate enough finger sandwiches to make herself sick, and Noah stood by the window with Victoria, talking about things that didn't matter: the weather, the city, the way the lights looked from up here. She didn't ask about his life, and he didn't ask about hers, and somehow that made it easier. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Victoria's leg, and Victoria froze like she didn't know what to do with the contact. Then slowly, she put a hand on Emma's head. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for inviting us," Emma said. "This was the best party ever." Victoria looked at Noah, and for just a second her guard dropped. "Take care of her." "I always do." They left the same way they came, through the grand ballroom and out into the night. The bus ride home was quiet. Emma fell asleep against Noah's shoulder, and he stared out the window, replaying the conversation in his head. He didn't trust Victoria Hale, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been telling the truth, that she was trying, in her own way, to do something right. And that scared him more than anything. The rumors started on Monday. Noah heard them before he even clocked in. Jerry and a couple of the other guys standing by the coffee machine talking in low voices. "I'm telling you, it's happening. They're selling the building." "Who told you that?" "My cousin works for the city, said the permits are already filed." Noah's stomach dropped. He walked past them without saying anything, grabbed his toolbox, and headed to the bay. But the rumors followed him all day, whispered between oil changes and brake jobs, until everyone in the shop knew. By the time his shift ended, the news was official. Jerry called a meeting in the break room, his face grim. "I just got off the phone with the property manager. Hale Industries is moving forward with the sale. We got 6 months, maybe less, before we're out." Someone swore. Someone else threw a wrench against the wall. "What are we supposed to do?" one of the younger guys asked. "Find another job," Jerry said flatly. "That's all we can do." Noah walked out before anyone could see his face. He got in his truck and just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. Victoria had lied. Or she'd tried and failed. Either way, the result was the same. He thought about Emma, about the way she'd smiled at Victoria like she was someone worth trusting. He thought about the invitation, the party, the way Victoria had looked at him and said, "I'm trying to find another way." It had all been for nothing. Noah started the truck and pulled out of the lot, his hands shaking. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove, letting the anger build until it burned through the exhaustion, until all he wanted was to stand in front of Victoria Hale and ask her why. Why she'd invited them, why she'd pretended to care, why she'd made him think for just a moment that maybe the world wasn't as cruel as he knew it was. But he didn't go to her building. He went home, picked up Emma, and held her while she talked about her day. And when she asked if they could see Victoria again, he said, "I don't think so, baby." "Why not?" "Because some people aren't who we think they are." Emma frowned, not understanding. But she didn't push, she just hugged him tighter, and Noah closed his eyes, trying to forget the way Victoria had looked at him in that upstairs lounge. Like maybe she was just as lost as he was. Victoria found out about the sale approval the same way Noah did, too late to stop it. She was in Singapore when Richard sent the email, 3 lines that might as well have been a declaration of war. Board voted 7-3 to proceed with Riverside's sale. Contract signed this morning. Thought you should know. She read it on her phone at 2 in the morning, sitting in a hotel room that cost more per night than most people made in a week. The city lights stretched below her window, unfamiliar and cold, and all she could think about was the way Emma had looked at her in that upstairs lounge, like Victoria was someone worth believing in. She called Richard. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "It's done, Victoria. The vote was clean. You held the vote while I was out of the country. You were invited to call in. You chose not to. Because you scheduled it for 3 in the morning, my time. That's not my problem." Richard's tone shifted, sharper now. "Look, you've been dragging your feet on this for months. The board is tired of waiting. We have investors who want action, not sentiment. Those businesses have been there for 20 years. And they've been failing for 10. We're not a charity, Victoria." She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that his numbers didn't account for people, for lives, for the mechanic who worked 60 hours a week just to keep his daughter fed. But Richard wouldn't care. He'd made a career out of not caring. "I want the contracts reviewed," she said. There's nothing to review. It's over." He hung up before she could respond. Victoria sat in the dark, staring at her phone. She thought about calling her lawyer, thought about finding some loophole, some way to undo what Richard had orchestrated. But deep down, she knew it was pointless. The board had voted. The contracts were signed. All she'd managed to do was delay the inevitable. She should have fought harder. She should have been there. But she'd been in Singapore negotiating a deal that would net Hale Industries another $40 million, and she'd let herself believe that mattered more. She flew back the next day, landing at noon and going straight to the office. Claire met her in the lobby, her expression tight. "Richard's been in your office." "What?" "He said he needed to grab some files. I tried to stop him, but..." Victoria didn't wait for the rest. She crossed the lobby in long strides, her heels echoing off the marble, and took the elevator to the top floor. When she reached her office, the door was ajar. Richard was sitting at her desk, leafing through a folder. "Get out." He looked up, unfazed. "Just catching up on some reading. You keep interesting files, Victoria." "I said get out." Richard closed the folder and stood, smoothing his tie. "You know, I used to respect you. You were smart, ruthless when you needed to be. But lately, you've been soft. That charity event, inviting random people off the street, what were you thinking?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "How I run my events is none of your business. It is when it makes the company look weak." Richard crossed to the door, pausing in the threshold. "The board is watching you. They're wondering if you still have what it takes to lead. Don't give them a reason to ask that question out loud." He left, and Victoria stood there, her fists clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. She wanted to throw something, to break something, but she forced herself to breathe, to think. Richard wasn't just positioning himself to take over. He was actively sabotaging her, piece by piece, until she had nothing left. And the worst part was, she'd handed him the ammunition. Yes, sir. Noah found out Victoria had tried to stop the sale from Carlos, who'd heard it from his sister, who worked in the legal department at Hale Industries. The story was muddled, full of gaps and assumptions, but the core was clear. Victoria had opposed the sale. The board had overruled her. Noah didn't know what to do with that information. It didn't change the fact that he was losing his job. It didn't change the fact that he'd have to tell Emma they might lose the apartment, might have to move somewhere cheaper, somewhere farther from her school and the community center and everything familiar. But it changed something else. It meant Victoria had been telling the truth. He spent 3 days thinking about it, turning it over in his mind while he worked on engines and avoided Jerry's eyes. By Friday, he'd made a decision he knew was stupid but couldn't talk himself out of. He went to Hale Industries. The receptionist recognized him this time, though her smile was strained. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Victoria Hale." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then I'm afraid, just tell her Noah Carter is here. She'll know who I am." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. She spoke quietly, too low for Noah to hear, then hung up. "Someone will be down in a moment." Noah expected security. Instead, Claire appeared, her expression cautious but not hostile. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Hale is in a meeting, but if you'd like to wait, I'll wait." Claire led him to a small conference room on the 3rd floor and offered him coffee, which he declined. Then she left, and Noah sat alone, staring at the abstract art on the walls and wondering what the hell he was doing. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Victoria stepped in, and Noah stood without thinking. She looked tired, more tired than she had at the party. Her suit was perfect, her hair pulled back, but there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "You came to my building again," she said. "Yeah, seems to be a habit." Victoria closed the door and leaned against it, her arms crossed. "I assume you heard about Riverside." "I heard you tried to stop it." She didn't confirm or deny. She just looked at him, waiting. Noah exhaled. "Why did you try?" "Because it was the right thing to do." "That's not enough of a reason. Not for someone like you." Victoria's expression flickered, something between anger and hurt. "What do you think someone like me is?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Noah ran a hand through his hair. "You invited us to that party. You looked my daughter in the eye and made her think you cared. And then I find out you're selling the building anyway, and I don't know what to believe." "I didn't sell it. My board did." "You're the CEO. Doesn't that mean something?" "It means I run the company. It doesn't mean I control every decision." Victoria's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I delayed that vote for 3 months, trying to find a better option. I restructured deals, pushed back against my CFO, put my own position at risk. And in the end, they voted while I was out of the country because they knew I'd fight it." Noah stared at her. "You're telling me you lost?" "Yes. People like you don't lose." "People like me lose all the time. We just don't talk about it." Victoria moved to the table and sat, gesturing for Noah to do the same. "I'm not going to apologize for being successful. I worked for everything I have. But success doesn't mean invincibility. It means making choices where every option hurts someone." Noah sat slowly. "So what now?" Now the building sells and you find another job. Just like that. Just like that. Victoria's gaze was steady, unflinching. Unless you have a better idea. Noah laughed bitterly. Yeah, I got lots of ideas, none of them worth a damn. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, I could write you a recommendation, help you find something else. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, it's practical. You're good at what you do and you deserve better than working for someone like Jerry. You don't even know Jerry. I know men like him. They take advantage because they can. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Let me help. Noah wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her to keep her recommendations and her guilt and her perfect solutions that didn't solve anything. But he thought about Emma, about the bills stacking up, about the fact that pride didn't pay rent. Fine, he said, but I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for my daughter. I know. Victoria kept her word. By the following week, Noah had 3 interviews lined up. Real jobs with benefits and better pay than Jerry had ever offered. He took the first one that said yes, a shop across town that specialized in European imports. The hours were still long, but the owner didn't treat him like he was replaceable. Emma noticed the change. She asked fewer questions about money, smiled more at breakfast, even stopped waking up in the middle of the night asking if they were okay. Noah told himself it was enough, told himself he didn't owe Victoria anything beyond a thank you, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she'd looked when she admitted she'd lost. The way she'd offered to help without making him feel small. The way she'd sat across from him in that conference room like they were equals, even though they both knew they weren't. He told himself it didn't matter. Their lives had intersected by accident, and now they were back on separate tracks. That's how the world worked. Except Emma kept asking about her. When can we see Victoria again? I don't know, baby. But she was nice, and she liked Mr. Carrot. I'm sure she did. Can we send her a picture of me and Mr. Carrot? Noah hesitated. It would be easy to say no, to let the connection fade. But Emma was looking at him with those hopeful eyes, and he didn't have it in him to disappoint her. Yeah, okay. We can do that. They took a picture in the park, Emma holding Mr. Carrot up to the camera, grinning like the world was full of good things. Noah sent it to the email address on Victoria's business card with a short message. Emma wanted you to have this. Thanks again for your help. He didn't expect a response. But 2 days later, his phone buzzed with a reply. Tell Emma that Mr. Carrot looks very distinguished, and you're welcome. It was formal, impersonal, exactly what Noah expected. But at the bottom, there was one more line. If you ever need anything, let me know. Noah stared at that line for a long time before deleting the email. Victoria's problems got worse. The Riverside sale closed without incident, and Richard wasted no time taking credit for it at the next board meeting. He stood at the head of the table presenting projections and profit margins like he'd orchestrated the whole thing, and the board ate it up. Victoria sat at the other end, her hands folded, her expression neutral. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She just let him talk, knowing that every word was another nail in her coffin. When the meeting ended, Richard stopped by her office. You're being awfully quiet lately. Victoria didn't look up from her computer. I'm busy. Busy losing control. Richard leaned against the doorframe. The board's starting to wonder if you're the right person to lead this company into the next phase. Let them wonder. I'm serious, Victoria. You've been distracted. That charity event, the delays on Riverside, now you're spending time writing recommendations for random mechanics. Victoria's head snapped up. How do you know about that? Richard smiled. I make it my business to know, and I'm telling you, it looks bad. Like you're more interested in playing savior than running a company. Get out of my office. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to position yourself to take over, and you're doing a piss-poor job of hiding it. Richard's smile faded. You're going to regret this. I already do. He left, and Victoria sat back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She'd built this company from nothing, and now it was eating her alive. Richard was right about one thing. She was distracted. But it wasn't because of Noah or Emma or some misguided attempt at redemption. It was because for the first time in years, she'd been reminded what it felt like to be human, and she didn't know how to go back to being anything else. The call came on a Tuesday night. Noah was halfway through washing dishes when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Carter?" A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "Yeah?" "This is Amanda Cross from the legal department at Hale Industries. I'm calling because Ms. Hale asked me to reach out to you directly." Noah's stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "Not exactly, but there's a situation developing that might affect you, and Ms. Hale wanted you to be aware of it before it becomes public." "What kind of situation?" Amanda hesitated. "There's been an internal investigation into financial irregularities within the company, specifically irregularities related to the Riverside acquisition and several others over the past 2 years. Ms. Hale has reason to believe that evidence was falsified to push those deals through." Noah's grip on the phone tightened. "What does that have to do with me?" "One of the businesses affected by the Riverside sale was the auto shop where you worked. If the evidence was falsified, it means the sale may have been based on fraudulent assessments. Ms. Hale is working to gather proof, but she wanted you to know in case there are legal ramifications that could impact you or your former coworkers." Noah sat down hard on the couch. "You're saying the sale was illegal?" "We're saying it may have been based on false pretenses. Ms. Hale is trying to determine the full scope, but it's complicated and dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Amanda paused. "The people involved have a lot to lose. If Ms. Hale exposes this, there will be consequences. For them, for the company, and possibly for her. But she's moving forward anyway because she believes it's the right thing to do." Noah rubbed his face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Ms. Hale asked me to. She said you deserved to know." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Amanda said, "Mr. Carter, if anyone contacts you asking questions about Ms. Hale or your interactions with her, please let us know immediately, and be careful." She hung up before Noah could respond. He sat there, staring at his phone, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. Victoria was investigating her own company. She was putting herself at risk to expose fraud, and she'd made sure he knew about it, even though it would have been easier to keep him in the dark. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy? Who was that?" "Nobody, baby. Go back to bed." "Are you okay?" Noah forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. He was thinking about Victoria standing in that conference room admitting she'd lost. He was thinking about the way she'd offered to help without asking for anything in return. He was thinking about the fact that she was fighting a battle she might not win, and she was doing it alone. Tiet. Victoria knew she was being followed. She spotted the car 3 days in a row, always 2 blocks behind, never close enough to be obvious. She didn't know if it was Richard's doing or someone else on the board, but it didn't matter. She'd expected this the moment she started asking questions. The evidence was worse than she'd thought. Richard hadn't just pushed the Riverside sale through. He'd falsified inspection reports, bribed city officials, and buried assessments that would have shown the property was salvageable. And Riverside wasn't the only one. There were at least 6 other properties where the same thing had happened, all within the last 2 years. Victoria had copies of everything locked in a safe deposit box. She'd hired a forensic accountant who confirmed what she already suspected, and she'd scheduled a meeting with the board for the end of the week. Richard was going to fight. He had allies, people who'd benefited from his schemes, and they'd do whatever it took to protect themselves. Victoria knew that exposing him meant exposing the company, tanking the stock price, and possibly destroying everything she'd built. But she was done pretending the numbers were all that mattered. Claire knocked on her door, her face pale. "Victoria, there's someone here to see you." "I'm not taking visitors." "It's Noah Carter." Victoria's head snapped up. "What?" "He's downstairs. He says it's urgent." Victoria grabbed her jacket and took the elevator down. Noah was waiting in the lobby, pacing near the windows. When he saw her, he stopped. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Your lawyer called me, told me about the investigation. Amanda shouldn't have. She did the right thing." Noah crossed to her, his expression hard. "You're going after your own company, alone." "I'm not alone. I have legal counsel." "That's not what I mean." He glanced around the lobby, then lowered his voice. "You're putting yourself at risk. For what? For people like me?" "For people like your daughter," Victoria said quietly. "For everyone who gets crushed when people like Richard decide profit matters more than lives." Noah stared at her. "You're going to lose everything." "Probably." And you're still doing it. Yes. He shook his head, something like disbelief crossing his face. You're out of your mind. Maybe. I came here to tell you to stop, to walk away before it gets worse. Victoria met his gaze. Would you? Noah opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. No, I wouldn't. Then you understand. I understand you're about to go to war with people who have more power than you do, and I understand that when this goes public, they're going to come after you with everything they've got. I know. Noah exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Then let me help. Victoria blinked. What? You heard me. Let me help. I was there. I saw what happened to that building, to the people who worked there. If you need someone to testify, to back up your story, I'll do it. Noah, you don't have to. Yeah, I do. His voice was firm. You helped me when you didn't have to. You fought for something you didn't even benefit from. That means something. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. She wanted to tell him no, to protect him from the fallout that was coming, but she also knew that she couldn't do this alone. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Noah nodded. Then, after a moment, he said, Emma wanted me to tell you something. She said you're the bravest person she's ever met. Victoria's throat tightened. She barely knows me. She knows enough. They stood there, the noise of the lobby fading into background static. For the first time since this whole mess started, Victoria didn't feel quite so alone, and that terrified her almost as much as what was coming next. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday at 9. Victoria spent Thursday night in her office going over the evidence one more time, checking every document, every email, every falsified report. Amanda had assembled a file 3 inches thick, and it was damning. Richard had been sloppy, too confident in his position to cover his tracks properly. Claire brought her coffee at midnight and didn't ask why she was still there. She just set the cup on the desk and said, You need to sleep. I will. After tomorrow. Victoria, I'm fine. Claire didn't look convinced, but she left anyway. Victoria sat alone in the dark, the city lights casting shadows across the walls, and allowed herself one moment of doubt. She could still walk away. She could bury the evidence, let Richard have what he wanted, and keep her position. It would be easier, safer. But then she thought about Emma sitting in her chair, smiling like the world made sense. She thought about Noah standing in the lobby, offering to help even though he had nothing to gain. And she knew she couldn't walk away, no matter what it cost. At 7 the next morning, she went home, showered, and put on her best suit, the one she'd worn to her first board meeting 10 years ago. It felt like armor. She needed it to be. The board meeting started on time. Richard was already seated when Victoria walked in, flanked by 2 board members who'd voted with him on every major decision for the past year. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of smile that said he thought he'd already won. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table and set the file in front of her. The room went quiet. Before we begin, she said, I need to address a matter that's come to my attention. It concerns financial irregularities related to several property acquisitions, including the Riverside sale. Richard's smile didn't falter. Victoria, if this is about your opposition to that deal, it's not about my opposition. It's about fraud. The room erupted. Board members started talking over each other, some demanding clarification, others telling Victoria to be careful with accusations like that. Richard held up a hand, his expression calm. That's a serious allegation. I hope you have proof. Victoria opened the file and slid copies across the table. Inspection reports for the Riverside property were falsified. City officials were bribed to expedite permits. Environmental assessments were buried. All of it traceable back to you, Richard. Richard barely glanced at the documents. This is desperation. You're trying to discredit me because you lost the vote. I lost the vote because you manipulated the information the board was given. If they'd seen the real assessments, they never would have approved the sale. One of the board members, an older woman named Helena, picked up the documents and started reading. Her expression shifted from skepticism to alarm. These inspection dates don't match what we were shown. Because they were altered, Victoria said. The forensic accountant I hired confirmed it. There are at least 6 other properties where the same thing happened. Richard has been defrauding this company for 2 years, and I'm bringing it to light. Richard leaned back in his chair, his calm finally cracking. You hired a forensic accountant without board approval? You're investigating your own CFO behind closed doors? That sounds like a breach of fiduciary duty. What's a breach of duty is falsifying reports to push through deals that benefit you personally. I have records of payments made to your private accounts, Richard. Kickbacks from developers who bought properties we sold under false pretenses. The room went silent. Helena set the documents down, her face pale. If this is true, it's not, Richard said sharply. This is a witch hunt. Victoria's been losing her grip for months, and now she's lashing out. Then you won't mind if we bring in an independent auditor to verify these claims, Victoria said. Richard's jaw tightened. I absolutely mind. This is a waste of time and resources based on the paranoid accusations of someone who's clearly unfit to lead. Unfit? Victoria's voice was cold. I've led this company for a decade. I've increased its value tenfold. And the only reason you're sitting in that chair is because I brought you on as CFO when no one else would hire you. Richard stood, his face flushed. You self-righteous— Sit down, Helena said sharply. She looked at Victoria. How long have you known about this? 3 weeks. I wanted to be certain before I brought it to the board. And you waited until now. Why not come to us immediately? Because half of you have financial ties to the developers Richard's been working with. I needed to make sure the evidence was airtight before I presented it. Helena's expression hardened. Are you accusing other board members of complicity? I'm saying that Richard didn't do this alone. And I'm saying that if we don't address it now, this company will be facing criminal charges within a month. Richard laughed bitterly. You're bluffing. You don't have the spine to go to the authorities. Victoria met his gaze. I already did. The DA's office has a copy of everything. They're opening an investigation next week. The room exploded again. Richard's face went white. Helena stood, her hands shaking. You went to the district attorney without consulting the board. I went to the district attorney because this board has been compromised, and because I'm not going to let this company become a front for fraud. Richard slammed his hand on the table. You just destroyed us. The moment this goes public, our stock tanks. Investors pull out. We're done. Maybe, Victoria said, but at least we'll be done honestly. Helena looked around the table, then back at Victoria. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene with legal counsel present. Richard, you're suspended pending investigation. Victoria, I'm resigning, Victoria said. The room went silent. Effective immediately, I'll stay on long enough to cooperate with the investigation, but I'm not leading this company through the fallout. That's on the board now. She stood, picked up her file, and walked out before anyone could respond. The news broke that afternoon. By evening, it was everywhere. Major outlets, financial networks, social media. Hale Industries CEO resigns amid fraud investigation. The stock price dropped 30% in an hour. Investors demanded answers. Analysts predicted the company wouldn't survive the scandal. Victoria watched it unfold from her apartment, a glass of wine in her hand that she didn't drink. Her phone rang non-stop. Reporters, former colleagues, her brother Marcus calling for the 5th time. She ignored all of it. At 8, there was a knock on her door. She almost didn't answer, but when she checked the peephole, she saw Noah standing in the hallway, holding Emma's hand. Victoria opened the door, surprised. What are you doing here? We saw the news, Noah said. Emma wanted to check on you. Emma stepped forward, holding out a drawing. I made you this. It's you and me and Daddy and Mr. Carrot. We're all holding hands. Victoria took the drawing, her throat tight. Thank you, Emma. It's really beautiful. Are you okay? Emma asked. The TV said you're in trouble. Victoria crouched down to her level. I'm okay. I just had to do something hard, and now people are upset about it. Was it the right thing? I think so. Then it doesn't matter if people are upset. That's what my daddy says. Victoria glanced at Noah, who shrugged. She's not wrong. Victoria stood, still holding the drawing. You shouldn't be here. The press is going to start digging, and if they find out we know each other, let them dig, Noah said. I'm not hiding. Noah, I mean it. You did this because it was right. If that means dealing with reporters, I can handle it. Victoria wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She stepped aside. Come in, please. They sat in her living room, which was pristine and cold and looked like no one actually lived there. Emma explored, touching the modern art on the walls and asking questions about every object like it was treasure. Noah sat across from Victoria, his hands clasped between his knees. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. "Bad. The company's going to take a hit. Richard's going to fight the charges, and I'm probably going to be dragged through depositions for the next year." "But you exposed him." "Yeah, I did." Noah shook his head. "I still can't believe you walked away from all of it." "I didn't have a choice. If I stayed, I'd just be managing the damage. This way the board has to deal with it themselves." "And what are you going to do?" Victoria laughed without humor. "I have no idea." Emma came over and climbed onto the couch next to Victoria, leaning against her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Victoria froze, unsure what to do, and then slowly put an arm around the little girl. "You should come stay with us," Emma said. Noah's eyes widened. "Emma? What? She's all alone here, and our couch is really comfy." Victoria smiled despite herself. "That's very kind, but I'll be okay." "Are you sure? Because you look sad." Victoria's chest tightened. She looked at Noah, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm sure. But thank you." They stayed for another hour. Emma told Victoria about school, about her new friend who had a pet hamster, about the drawing she was working on for art class. Noah sat quietly, interjecting occasionally, and Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in weeks. When they finally left, Emma hugged her goodbye, and Noah lingered in the doorway. "If you need anything," he said, "call me. I mean it." "I know. Thank you." He hesitated, then said, "You're not alone in this, Victoria. Don't forget that." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and closed the door after they left. The apartment felt emptier than it had before. The investigation moved quickly. Richard was formally charged with fraud, bribery, and embezzlement. 2 other board members resigned. Hale Industries' stock continued to plummet, and creditors started circling. The company Victoria had built was tearing itself apart, and all she could do was watch. Noah called her every few days, checking in. She told him she was fine, even when she wasn't. He didn't push, just listened when she needed to talk, and sent pictures of Emma when she didn't. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Victoria got a call from Helena. "The board wants to offer you your position back, Jag." Victoria was sitting in a coffee shop, staring out the window at the rain. "What?" "We've stabilized the situation. Richard's out, the investigation is ongoing, but investors are starting to come back. We need leadership. We need you." "I resigned. And we're asking you to reconsider. The company can't survive without you, Victoria." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "What happens to the people who were hurt by Richard's deals? The businesses that were shut down? The families that were displaced?" Helena sighed. "That's not our concern right now. We need to focus on—" "It should be your concern. That's the whole point. Victoria, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You want me back because the ship is sinking, but the reason it's sinking is because no one cared about the people we were supposed to serve. And if that doesn't change, there's no point in saving it." Helena was silent. Then she said, "What do you want?" Victoria hadn't planned this. She'd spent 3 weeks thinking she was done with Hale Industries, done with corporate maneuvering and boardroom politics. But now, sitting in this coffee shop with rain streaking the windows, she realized she had one more move to make. "I want the board to approve a fund. Restitution for the businesses affected by Richard's fraud. Real money, not a token gesture. And I want oversight on every future acquisition to make sure this never happens again." "That's going to cost millions." "I know, but it's the right thing to do." Helena was quiet for a long time. "I'll bring it to the board. And if they say no, then we lose you, and probably the company." Helena hung up. Victoria sat there, staring at her phone, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The board approved the fund. Reluctantly, with complaints and negotiations, but they approved it. Victoria returned to Hale Industries a month after she'd left, not as CEO, but as Chief Operating Officer with autonomy over community outreach and ethical oversight. It was a demotion in title, but it gave her the power to do what she'd wanted all along. The first business she contacted was the auto shop. Jerry had closed it after the sale went through, but most of the mechanics were still in the area, scrambling for work. Victoria arranged a meeting with them, offering settlements and job placement assistance. Some of them were skeptical. Others were just grateful. Noah wasn't at the meeting. He'd moved on to the new shop across town, and Victoria didn't blame him. But she sent him a message anyway. "We're trying to make things right. If you know anyone who needs help, let me know." He didn't respond for 2 days. Then, late on a Thursday night, her phone buzzed. "Can we talk?" They met at a diner near his apartment, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Noah was already there when Victoria arrived, sitting in the back corner, looking uncomfortable in his work jacket. She slid into the booth across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." "Yeah, I wasn't sure I should." "Why not?" Noah rubbed the back of his neck. "Because every time I see you, my life gets more complicated." Victoria almost smiled. "Fair." They ordered coffee neither of them wanted, and for a while they just sat there, not saying anything. Then Noah said, "I heard about the fund, what you're doing for the guys from the shop. It's the least I could do. It's more than most people would do." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Why are you really doing this, Victoria? And don't tell me it's just because it's right. There's something else." Victoria hesitated. She could deflect, give him the corporate answer, the safe answer. But she was tired of being safe. "Because your daughter sat in my chair and smiled at me like I mattered. And no one's done that in a long time." Noah stared at her. "That's it? That's why you blew up your whole career?" "That's part of it. The rest is—" She stopped, searching for the words. "I spent 10 years building something I thought was important. And then I met you, and I realized I'd forgotten what important actually meant." Noah shook his head slowly. "You're really something, you know that?" "I don't know if that's a compliment." "It is." He leaned back, studying her. "Emma keeps asking about you. Every day. When can we see Victoria? Can we invite her over? Does she like pancakes?" Victoria felt something warm in her chest. "Does she?" "I don't know. Do you?" "I've never made pancakes." Noah laughed, the sound surprising both of them. "You've never made pancakes?" "I don't cook." "What do you eat?" "Take out. Salads from the place downstairs, whatever Claire orders for lunch meetings." Noah looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Come over Sunday. I'll make pancakes." Emma would lose her mind. Victoria's first instinct was to say no, to keep the boundaries clear, to not let this become something it couldn't be. But then she thought about Emma's drawing, still taped to her fridge, and she heard herself say, "Okay." "Yeah?" "Yeah, what time?" 10. "And Victoria?" Noah's expression softened. "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "Yeah, I do." Sunday morning, Victoria stood outside Noah's apartment building, second-guessing everything. She was wearing jeans, actual jeans, not the designer kind, and a sweater, and she felt more out of place than she had in any boardroom. She almost turned around. Then the door buzzed, and Noah's voice came through the intercom. "You coming up or what?" She went up. The apartment was small, cluttered in the way homes are when people actually live in them. Toys scattered on the floor, dishes in the sink, a jacket thrown over the back of the couch. It smelled like coffee and something sweet. Emma ran to the door the moment Victoria walked in, throwing her arms around her waist. "You came!" "I did." Victoria looked at Noah over Emma's head. He was standing in the kitchenette, wearing an apron that said "Kiss the Cook," and he looked embarrassed about it. "Don't judge the apron." Emma picked it out. "I think it suits you." Noah snorted. "Sit down. Pancakes are almost ready." Victoria sat at the small table while Emma climbed into the chair next to her, chattering about school and Mr. Carrot and everything else that had happened since they'd last seen each other. Noah brought over a plate stacked with pancakes, slightly burnt at the edges, but smelling incredible. "I'm not a great cook," he warned. "They're perfect," Victoria said, and meant it. They ate together, the three of them, and it was the most normal thing Victoria had done in months. Emma told jokes that didn't make sense. Noah teased her gently about her messy hair, and Victoria sat there, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she belonged. After breakfast, Emma dragged her to the couch to show her a new drawing, and Noah cleaned up the kitchen. Victoria watched him move around the small space, efficient and comfortable, and realized she was staring. "You okay?" Noah asked, catching her eye. "Yeah, I'm good." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made her chest tighten. "Good." Emma fell asleep halfway through the second movie, her head on Victoria's lap. Victoria looked down at her, this little girl who'd walked into her office and changed everything, and felt tears prick her eyes. Noah noticed. "You want me to move her?" "No, she's fine." He sat down on the other side of the couch, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. They sat in silence for a while, the TV playing softly, Emma's breathing steady between them. "This is nice," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah, it is. I didn't think I'd ever have something like this." Noah looked at her. "Like what?" "This. People who—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "People who care if I show up." Noah's expression softened. "Victoria, you've got to stop thinking you're alone in this." "I'm not used to anything else." "Then get used to it, because Emma's not letting you go anytime soon, and neither am I." Victoria turned to him, her heart pounding. "Noah, I'm serious. I don't know what this is or where it's going, but I know I want you here. Emma wants you here, so stop acting like you're some kind of burden, okay?" Victoria didn't know what to say. She'd spent her whole life being strong, being untouchable, and here was this man telling her she didn't have to be, that she was wanted just as she was. "Okay," she whispered. Noah reached over and took her hand, and they sat like that, Emma asleep between them, until the sun started to set and the apartment filled with golden light. For the first time in a long time, Victoria wasn't thinking about the next meeting, the next deal, the next crisis. She was just there, in that moment, with people who made her feel human. And it was enough. The weeks that followed were different. Victoria started showing up at Noah's apartment on Sundays, then Wednesdays, then whenever Emma asked. She learned to make pancakes, though they were never as good as Noah's. She sat through animated movies she didn't understand and helped with homework she had to Google. And slowly, the sharp edges she'd carried for so long started to smooth out. Noah watched it happen with something close to wonder. This woman who'd terrified her own board members would sit cross-legged on his living room floor, playing cards with his daughter, losing on purpose and pretending not to. She'd laugh at Emma's terrible jokes and listen to stories about kids at school like they mattered more than quarterly earnings. But it wasn't seamless. There were moments when Victoria would go quiet, staring at her phone with an expression that said she was somewhere else entirely. Moments when Noah would catch her looking around his apartment like she was trying to figure out how she'd ended up there. And moments when he'd see the weight she carried, the guilt over things she couldn't change, and the fear that she didn't deserve this. One night, after Emma had gone to bed, they sat on the couch with the TV muted, neither of them really watching. "You're thinking too loud," Noah said. Victoria glanced at him. "What?" "You do this thing where you get real quiet and your jaw gets tight. What's going on?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm waiting for this to fall apart." "Why would it fall apart?" "Because things like this don't happen to people like me. I don't get—" She gestured vaguely around the apartment. "This, family dinners and movie nights and people who care if I show up, that's not my life." "It is now." "For how long?" Victoria turned to face him. "You don't know me, Noah. Not really. You know the version of me that shows up here on Sundays, but you don't know what I'm like at work, how cold I can be, how many people I've hurt making decisions that benefited the bottom line. You think I don't have regrets?" Noah's voice was quiet but firm. "I missed my wife's last birthday because I was working a double shift. Emma asked me why Mommy wasn't getting better, and I told her to stop asking questions because I couldn't handle hearing them. I've made 1,000 mistakes, and I'll make 1,000 more. That doesn't mean I don't deserve to be happy, and neither do you." Victoria's eyes glistened. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Let people in. Trust that they won't leave." Noah reached over and took her hand. "Then learn. I'll wait." She looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "You're too good for me." "That's not true." "It is. You're a good man, Noah. You deserve someone who isn't—" "Victoria." He squeezed her hand. "Stop. You're here because I want you here. Emma wants you here. And if you keep trying to talk yourself out of it, you're going to miss what's right in front of you." She was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder, and Noah put his arm around her, and they sat like that until the sky outside started to lighten. The legal fallout from Richard's case dragged on for months. Depositions, hearings, settlements. Victoria spent hours with lawyers going over documents and timelines, reliving every decision she'd made. Richard fought hard, hiring expensive attorneys and leaking stories to the press about Victoria's alleged vendetta against him. The media ate it up. But the evidence was too strong. Richard was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to 8 years. 2 other executives went down with him. Hale Industries survived, but barely. The stock price stabilized at half of what it had been, and the company was forced to restructure. Victoria stayed on as COO, but her relationship with the board was strained. They blamed her for the scandal, for the losses, for the damage to the company's reputation. She didn't care. She'd done what she set out to do, and she could live with the consequences. What she couldn't live with was the distance it created between her and the people she'd started to care about. Noah noticed it first. Victoria started canceling plans, claiming work emergencies. She'd show up late, distracted, her phone buzzing constantly. Emma would ask her questions, and Victoria would answer without really hearing. It was like watching her retreat back into the person she'd been before, and Noah didn't know how to stop it. One Sunday, she didn't show up at all. Noah texted her, then called, but she didn't respond. Emma was crushed, sitting at the table with the plate of pancakes she'd helped make, staring at the door like Victoria might still walk through it. "She's just busy, baby," Noah said, though he didn't believe it himself. "She promised she'd come." "I know." "Did we do something wrong?" "No, you didn't do anything wrong." But Emma didn't look convinced, and Noah didn't blame her. He spent the rest of the day trying to distract her, but his mind was elsewhere. By the time he put Emma to bed, he'd made a decision. He drove to Victoria's apartment, not sure if she'd even let him in. The building was upscale, the kind with a doorman who looked at Noah like he didn't belong. Noah gave Victoria's name, and after a long pause, the doorman buzzed him up. Victoria answered on the 3rd knock. She looked exhausted, hair down, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt he'd never seen before. She looked more human than she ever had, and more unreachable at the same time. "Noah, what are you doing here?" "You didn't show up today." "I know, I'm sorry. Work got—" "Don't." Noah stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Don't lie to me. What's going on?" Victoria closed the door and leaned against it. "I can't do this." "Do what?" "This. You, Emma, pretending like I can be part of your life. It's not fair to either of you." Noah stared at her. "You're running." "I'm being realistic. You saw what happened with Richard, with the company. That's my world, Noah. Lawsuits and depositions and people who'd stab me in the back for a promotion. You don't want that in your life. Emma doesn't need that." "That's not your decision to make." "Yes, it is," Victoria's voice cracked, "because I care about you, both of you. And the longer this goes on, the more you're going to get hurt when it falls apart." Noah crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she had to look at him. "You're scared." "Of course I'm scared. So am I. You think I'm not terrified every time you walk through that door? You think I don't wonder if one day you're going to realize you can do better and leave? But I show up anyway, because that's what you do when you care about someone." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to be what you need. I don't need you to be anything. I just need you to stop running." She broke then, the tears spilling over, and Noah pulled her into his arms. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in her world, and maybe he was. They stood like that for a long time, the apartment quiet around them, and when she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red. "Emma made pancakes for you today," Noah said quietly. "She kept asking if you were coming. I told her you were just busy, but she knew. Kids always know." Victoria's face crumpled. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to her." "I will. I promise." Noah nodded. "Good. Because she loves you, Victoria, and I—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "I care about you, more than I probably should. So stop trying to protect us by pushing us away. We're stronger than you think." Victoria looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked completely vulnerable. "What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure it out. Together." Whoa. The next day, Victoria showed up at Noah's apartment with a gift for Emma, a stuffed rabbit that matched Mr. Carrot. Emma opened the door and just stared at her, and Victoria's heart broke at the hurt in her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't come yesterday," Victoria said, crouching down. "I made a mistake and I hurt your feelings, and that's not okay." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did you stop liking us?" "No, never. I was scared." "Of what?" of messing this up, of not being good enough for you and your dad. Emma frowned. But you're already good enough. You're Victoria. Victoria's throat tightened. She pulled Emma into a hug, and after a moment, Emma hugged her back. I brought you something, a friend for Mr. Carrot. Emma took the rabbit and held it up, her face lighting up. She's perfect. I'm going to name her Miss Lettuce. Miss Lettuce? Because Mr. Carrot needs a girlfriend, and lettuce goes with carrots. Victoria laughed despite herself. That's very logical. Emma ran inside to show Noah, and Victoria stood, wiping her eyes. Noah was standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said. For what? For not giving up on me. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria. You need to get that through your head. She nodded, and they went inside, and for the first time in weeks, Victoria felt like she could breathe again. 3 months later, Hale Industries announced a new initiative, a community development fund aimed at revitalizing neighborhoods affected by corporate acquisitions. Victoria spearheaded the project, pouring herself into it with the same intensity she'd once reserved for quarterly earnings. But this time, it felt different. It felt like building something that mattered. Noah was there through all of it, listening when she needed to vent, reminding her to eat when she forgot, making sure she didn't lose herself in the work the way she used to. Emma was there too, sitting at Victoria's kitchen table doing homework while Victoria worked on presentations, asking questions that forced Victoria to explain things in ways that made sense to a 7-year-old. It was messy and chaotic, and nothing like the life Victoria had planned. But it was real. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. One Saturday afternoon, Noah took Emma to the park, and Victoria stayed behind to finish a proposal. But she couldn't focus. She kept thinking about the way Emma had hugged her that morning, sleepy and warm and trusting. The way Noah had kissed her forehead before leaving, casual and easy like it was something they did every day. She thought about the life she'd built for herself, the corner office, the power, the control, and she thought about the life she was building now, smaller, messier, but infinitely more valuable. Her phone rang. Helena, calling about the upcoming board meeting. Victoria let it go to voicemail. An hour later, Noah and Emma came back, both of them windswept and laughing. Emma ran to show Victoria a rock she'd found that was shaped like a heart, and Noah dropped onto the couch beside her. You get your work done. Some of it. Good, because Emma wants you to come to her school thing next week, some kind of family day. Victoria froze. Family day? Yeah. They're supposed to bring someone important to them. She asked if you'd come. Victoria looked at Emma, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. You want me to come? Yes. You can meet my teacher and see my classroom and everything. Victoria's chest tightened. I'd love to. Emma cheered and ran off to her room, and Noah turned to Victoria. You okay? Yeah, She stopped, searching for the words. She called me family. You are family. Victoria looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Noah, I need to tell you something. He sat up straighter. Okay, I love you. The words came out rough, uncertain. I don't know when it happened, and I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I love you. And Emma, and this whole messy, complicated thing we've built, and I don't want to lose it. Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, slow and genuine. I love you too. Have for a while now. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was waiting for you to catch up. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. Noah leaned in and kissed her, soft and deliberate, and for the first time in her life, Victoria felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The family day at Emma's school was exactly as chaotic as Victoria expected. Kids running everywhere, parents trying to keep up, teachers looking frazzled but happy. Emma dragged Victoria from station to station, showing her projects and introducing her to friends. And Victoria tried not to feel out of place among the other parents in their casual clothes and easy smiles. But Emma held her hand the entire time, and Noah stayed close, and slowly Victoria stopped feeling like an outsider. At the end of the day, Emma's teacher pulled Victoria aside. Emma talks about you all the time. She's very proud of you. Victoria's throat tightened. She is? Oh yes. She told the whole class you're the bravest person she knows. Victoria looked across the room at Emma, who was showing Noah a painting she'd made. I think she has that backwards. I don't think so. It takes a lot of courage to show up for people, especially when you're not sure where you fit. But you're here. That's what matters. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Victoria and Noah sat on the couch, the apartment quiet around them. Victoria leaned against him, and Noah ran his fingers through her hair, and neither of them said anything for a long time. Finally, Victoria said, "I've been thinking. About what comes next. For us." Noah stilled. "And? I don't want this to be temporary. I don't want to keep pretending like I'm just visiting. I want—" She stopped, the words harder to say than she'd expected. "I want to be part of this, really part of it." Noah pulled back to look at her. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I don't know. What do you think I'm saying?" He smiled. "I think you're saying you want to stick around. Maybe move in. Maybe." Victoria's heart was pounding. "If you'll have me." Noah cupped her face in his hands. "Victoria Hale, I have been waiting for you to say that since the day you showed up here with that rabbit." She laughed, and he kissed her, and when they broke apart, Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. Victoria didn't quit Hale Industries, but she renegotiated her role. Fewer hours, more autonomy, the freedom to build the kind of company she'd always wanted it to be. She moved into Noah's apartment, which was too small for all of them but felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. Emma helped her unpack, arranging Victoria's books on the shelf next to her own and insisting that Mr. Carrot and Miss Lettuce share the nightstand in Victoria's new room. It wasn't perfect. They fought about stupid things, whose turn it was to do dishes, how to handle Emma's homework, whether the heat should be set to 70 or 72. Victoria still worked too much, and Noah still worried too much, and Emma still asked a million questions that neither of them knew how to answer, but it was real, and it was theirs. 6 months later, on a Sunday morning that looked like every other Sunday, Noah made pancakes while Emma set the table and Victoria poured juice. They ate together, the three of them, laughing at Emma's stories and planning the week ahead. And when Emma ran off to get dressed, Noah reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. "I have something for you." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "It's not my birthday." "I know." Noah pulled a small box from his pocket and set it on the table between them. Victoria stared at it. "Noah, before you panic, just listen. I know we've only been doing this for a few months. I know you're still figuring out how to be part of a family, but I also know that I don't want to do this with anyone else, and Emma doesn't either." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, no diamond, no flash, just a band that looked like it had been made for her. "Marry me, Victoria. Not because it's what people do, but because I want to build a life with you, a real one. The kind where we mess up and figure it out and keep showing up anyway." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You're serious. Completely. I don't know how to be a wife. You didn't know how to be a girlfriend either. You figured it out." She laughed through the tears. "I'm going to be terrible at this." "Probably, but so will I." Victoria looked at the ring, then at Noah, and realized that she wasn't scared. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from something good because she was afraid of losing it. She was just here, in this moment, with a man who loved her and a little girl who called her family. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Noah slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. He kissed her, and Emma came running in at the sound of her dad laughing, and when she saw the ring, she screamed with delight. "Does this mean Victoria's staying forever?" "Yeah, baby," Noah said. "Forever." Emma threw her arms around both of them, and they stood there in the kitchen, the three of them holding on to each other like they'd never let go. The wedding was small. Just a handful of people at the courthouse, Emma in a flower crown she'd made herself, Noah in the same suit he'd worn to the charity gala, Victoria in a simple white dress that felt more like her than anything she'd ever worn. Claire was there, wiping her eyes. Carlos and a few of the guys from the shop. Helena, surprisingly, who told Victoria she was proud of her. When the judge asked if they'd prepared vows, Victoria said no. But then she looked at Noah and found herself speaking anyway. "I don't have fancy words. I don't know how to promise I'll be perfect, because I won't be. But I can promise I'll show up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And I'll love you and Emma with everything I have, for as long as I have." Noah's eyes were bright. "That's more than enough." He said his vows, something about finding home in the last place he expected, and then they kissed, and Emma cheered, and that was it. They were married. Afterward, they went to the diner where Noah and Victoria had talked that night months ago. They ordered pancakes and burgers and milkshakes, and Emma got whipped cream on her nose, and Victoria laughed harder than she'd laughed in years. That night, back at the apartment, their apartment now, Victoria stood at the window looking out at the city. Noah came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You okay?" "Yeah. I'm just thinking." "About?" "About how different my life is now. A year ago, I thought success meant a corner office and a 7-figure salary. And now I'm standing here in a tiny apartment with a husband and a daughter. And I'm happier than I've ever been." Noah kissed her shoulder. "You were always meant for this, you know. You just had to find your way here." Victoria turned in his arms. "I didn't find my way. Emma did. She walked into my office and refused to see me the way everyone else did. She saw someone worth knowing. She was right. So were you." They stood like that for a while, the city lights flickering below them, Emma's soft breathing coming from the bedroom. And Victoria realized that she'd spent her whole life chasing something she thought she needed, when what she actually needed had been waiting for her all along. Not power, not success, not control, just people who loved her, who saw her flaws and stayed anyway, who reminded her that being human wasn't something to overcome. It was something to embrace. She'd been broken when Noah and Emma found her, closed off, afraid, convinced that she had to do everything alone, but they'd shown her a different way. They'd shown her that strength wasn't about never needing help. It was about letting people in when you did. And that love wasn't something you earned by being perfect. It was something you built day by day, by choosing to stay even when things got hard. Victoria looked at Noah, at the man who'd taught her what it meant to belong, and smiled. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me I didn't see in myself." "You would have found it eventually." "Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." Noah kissed her forehead. "You're never going to be alone again. Not if I have anything to say about it." And standing there in their small apartment, with the life they'd built together surrounding them, Victoria finally understood what it meant to be home.